All right. So training the dog, right? Sometimes it's not always easy. Sometimes it can be easy depending on what you're training your dog for. But think about it. When we add kids into the mix with training the dog, it can become a whole different show, whether it's a fiasco, whether it's a great show or whatever, but it can add an extra layer of difficulty or, chaos or things like that. So what I want to do is give you some tips to successfully train your dogs with kids, like I said, because that can be a whole thing. So keep in mind when you're talking about training your dog with kids or around kids and things like that, you want to take their age into consideration first and foremost. So I'm going to go through a few tips, but also keep the age into consideration because the tips that I'm providing are ideally great for all ages, but let me just jump into it and then I'll go through it as I'll talk about, age and stuff as we jump into the different tips. All right. So first things first, when you talk about training dogs with kids, you want to make sure that your dog has some form or start some type of basic obedience. So teaching your dog things like sit, stay, comes, and heel. You want to make sure your dogs have the basics down first before you get your kids involved, because then it'll be like a whole show. So just making sure that they have some form of basic obedience so that they're listening to you before you get the kids involved. Because if you think about it, you don't want to get the kids involved if the dog's not listening already as it is. So just starting some form of basic obedience in general, that's going to be helpful when you're talking about training kids and dogs. Also, when we talk about training dogs and kids as well, you want to make sure that you keep the training short, 5 to 15 minutes. Kids have short attention spans in general. Dogs, they have short attention spans too, especially if we're talking about training puppies. So you always want to make sure that you keep the training short, keep it positive. You don't want to get your dog into a space where you start to pull out training treats and stuff and they're like, oh gosh, this long training session again. And also you want to make it short and sweet for your kids as well, so they're not getting bored, because your kids can be just as impulsive as your dog. Also, you want to teach your kids to speak calmly and clearly around your dog. Dogs respond best if you talk to them calmly and clear, and also explaining to teaching them the commands in a calm, clear manner. So avoid your kids. If they're screaming, you just want to talk to them about talking in a calm, pleasant manner to your dog. You don't want to get them over aroused or overstimulated. So just be sure you're talking to your kids about staying calm and speaking to your dog clearly. Also, this is a big one: setting boundaries. Teach your dogs first the rules of the house and set boundaries with them first about misbehaving. So whether you're teaching your dog, hey, you're not allowed on the couch, or you have like a gated area that they're not allowed in, teaching your dog the boundaries first so that they're properly behaving, and then you can incorporate the kids to and teaching them the boundaries as well while you're teaching the dog. And that just helps all around. I'm a big fan, especially when you have babies or toddlers, using baby gates and teaching boundaries too, and have that separation so there's no accidents happen. So when we talk about boundaries with dogs, we're also talking about boundaries within the house and creating space. Another quick tip too is make sure you're supervising the interactions between your kids and dogs. Always supervise the interactions between your kids and dogs, especially when they're young, because you want to prevent any accidents. And I speak to this especially with the babies when they start crawling, and the toddlers when they start walking. That can be very startling to a dog that, all this time when you bring a baby home or you have a new baby, they're just sitting there, then boom, out the blue, they're walking. That can be very startling to a dog. Then also them pulling on the dog's hair and fur and things like that, the way they're petting the dog. So you always want to make sure that you supervise the interactions. There's so many different things you can do to make sure that it's going to be a safe interaction between your dog and your kids. That's a whole different live we'll talk about at another different time. But for now, just make sure you keep in the distance, keeping the space, monitoring the interactions, and I'm going to give you a few tips at the end, what games that you can play with your kids too that's going to be effective for training and good for your kids too, where, you know, the interactions are great. Also, just be patient with your dog, be patient with your kid, because everything, training takes time, them getting acclimated to, say if you have a new baby in a house, or, you know, babies are forever developmentally evolving and things like that. And like I said, it can be pretty startling to your dog. So just be patient, especially when you're talking about working with kids and dogs. Like I said, dealing with your dog and training your dog can be frustrating, but it can be a joy. And the same thing with the kids, it can be frustrating, it can be a joy. So when you combine that both together, you can either get a wonderful relationship or it can get pretty chaotic. But these are going to be the tips that you're going to use to make it pretty successful. All right. So I promised you I was going to give you some games for your kids to play with your dog that also helps with training, and it helps build a bond, and, you know, it's age appropriate as well. So one game that I do like to have the kids play is hide and seek. And so essentially it's just, you know, your kid's going to hide around the house and your dog's finding your child. And if they find them, your kid's going to give them a treat. They can even have them sit when they find them and give them a treat. So ideally, if your dog knows sit and stay, you would have your dog sit and stay while your kid runs off to a corner, and then they call your dog one at a time. And then when your dog gets to them, you know, you can treat, the kid gives them a treat. If your dog doesn't know sit and stay, you can hold your dog on the leash and then drop it once your kid calls your dog. So that's always a cool game to play inside. Dogs love it, the kids love it, and it's good training because, like I said, it's helping with recall, as well as, you know, if you have your dog sit when they come to the kids, then that works as well. Kids love, the next game is Simon Says. So just what it says, you can have your kid tell your dog to sit. You can have them tell them to stay. You can have them come when called. And when they do, you just want to give your dog a treat. And that way, your kids are having fun, but it's also teaching your dog basic commands at the same time. The last one that I really do love as well is red light, green light, because it teaches your dog to follow commands. And it also gives your kids a fun game to play. So red light, green light, you just have your kid walk. If you have a yard, if you're out and about, you can use a long line. Just have your kid walk, and then when you said red light, the kid stops, your dog stops, you can have them sit, you can give them a treat, green light, you go again, and so forth and so on until you cross the finish line, and you can do the same thing the other direction. So playing those games with your kid, and like I said in the beginning, make sure it's age appropriate. So of course, red light, green light is good for, like, you know, elementary kids or older kids, even adults. With the babies and toddlers, just a little quick tidbit, they love throwing and tossing stuff. And so I love if you have like a gated area, or if your baby's in a high chair and, you know, the dog's at a distance, you know, just letting your baby like throw food on the ground and have your dog search for treats, that's good too. Letting them sniff and kind of tire themselves out. So that's good for like the younger kids who are not more coordinated yet. But with that being said, I hope you have some successful tips to work with your dogs and kids. Try them out. Let me know how they're going. I'm always around. And if you need to, if you watch this live, but, you know, you're driving along, be sure to check out the podcast at Positive Dog Training Convos. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, all those, you know, audio streaming apps. But other than that, I will see you next week with another great topic. All right. See ya.